This one was really getting up to speed on the whole thing. And she said,
Be sure you have 2 life jackets on the boat.
and I thought, oh
Stay
my
calm.
God, please don't write that in the, don't write that in the Times or whatever you're writing for.
But
That's
be
all I
sure
can
you
think.
have 2 lights, 2 working, you know, like.
Yeah.
We can chat about Carlson later.
Yeah, okay.
That's
Or other
funny.
All right.
That's too funny. How are you doing on a sound level? Okay. And I still feel like I should be a little closer to you.
You can come a little closer if you want.
See, the thing is if I'm close to the lens, then when you look at me, which is
Okay,
probably
that's
you
what,
do,
yeah.
Just
then it
look at
looks,
her, completely ignore me.
Yeah, then it
Yeah.
looks like you're looking at the camera. You know, and if there's anything that you feel like you've misspoken about,
Okay.
no, yes, we certainly do.
Okay.
Okay? And I certainly have notes that I have to start with, but I'll probably, if you feel like I've missed something significant, don't hesitate
Okay.
to let me know that. Honey, the one thing I have this urge to do is kind of, what's your shot?
Well, you can see it.
When you're ready?
Yep.
Okay, well, rolling? Okay. Well, start by just having you say and spell your complete name.
It's H period Newcomb, Newcomb, Eldredge, Eldredge.
And H stands for?
Hellraiser. No, it stands for Harold.
And
What?
And you've hidden that away all these years.
Well, it was my father's name, and I was called Nuke, and there was another little Noonie, which my cousin gave me because she couldn't say Newcomb.
I remember that.
Okay.
And how about the highest rank served in the 10th Mountain Division?
PFC.
All the way.
I was acting sergeant on the last attack, but never, when I was hit, I had no desire to go, and because I didn't know how long I was going to be in the hospital. Did make a difference.
Okay, and I'll probably sort of work through this in a chronological way, but if there's something that you feel like you want to expand on, that's fine. This is more or less housekeeping stuff. Do you want to tell me the date of your enlistment or approximate month of your enlistment?
Yeah, it was November 43.
And the unit that you served in?
I served in, well, first of all, I went to infantry basic training. And it was infantry replacement training. And I had my 3 letters of recommendation ready to go to Camp Hale. And I had ROTC training. When I went to the reception center, they made me a sort of like a drill sergeant. And these guys who I was training with were, some of them are as old as my father. And, these were my buddies. I met these guys, the Zoot Suiters, from New York. Oh, they were great. And they were going to take me into New York to show me what life was all about. And I was ready to go. But in the meantime, a little corporal places me in charge of a platoon to march these guys back and forth. And so we had these pith helmets, and then stones would come onto my pith helmet and say, Eldredge, march us over to the woods. Well, they're my buddies, and I march them right over so they can have a smoking break. And so this went on, and then the little corporal would come over and chew me out. And this went on for a few days, and I really had it. And I told the corporal where to go. The next day, I was on the train for Fort McClellan, Alabama, not to Camp Hale. So this was part of my punishment. And and then I get to the 50,000 soldiers being trained as replacements at Fort McClellan, Alabama. And a lot of them were rednecks. They were a group from New York. And, you really don't get to know these guys too well. But there was one fellow by the name of, Werner Wolfgang Weiss. And his mother was a doctor in Munich. That's where he came from. His father was a leading construction equipment engineer. And so Hitler needed his talents. So we finally, we ended up in the same training squad. And he wanted to change his name. He didn't like the German name. So one day he came to me and said, "What do you think about Chuck?" I said, "Oh, that's a good name." So he's listed in the directory as Chuck W.W. Weiss. And then found out that he was a skier. You know, they went down to, you know, it was outside of Munich. I'm trying to think of that great mountain, the highest peak in Germany.
Like around
The Zugspitze. So his family were skiers. Found that out. And I said, "Hey, Chuck, you know, we're going to go overseas as replacements." And so we sat down and wrote 3 bogus letters of recommendation to the National Ski Patrol. And, well, I used to go to the training for sergeant. I went to him every week. And he would say, "Tough, S. Sonny," you know. And I said, "Great mistake here. I'm supposed to be at Camp Hale." And after this training period, they called out 17 of 50,000 trainers who were qualified for the ski troops. Chuck and I being 2, the guy who became my roommate, Bob Woody, and we went to Camp Hale on the Willow Bay. It was a Pullman car, and we just had a marvelous time. And we get to Camp Hale. Oh, it was like night and day, you know, difference of the intellect and the people that you were meeting.
You must have been very relieved.
Very relieved. And I must say, I did learn a hell of a lot at that Fort McClellan. And because a lot of these officers and enlisted men had come from North Africa, Sicily, and they'd been through it, and so we learned a lot. I must say that I probably far better training in infantry than most of the guys in the 10th got.
Now, how old were you when you got your authentic letters of recommendation?
Oh my! I had my letters of recommendation.
The
No,
real
I was
ones.
18.
You were 18.
Yeah, but
Now, who wrote your authentic letters of recommendation?
who wrote mine? My scoutmaster, the guy who was the National Ski Patrol fellow at Powder Mill Park, and I think it was either J.D. Whiting or Joe Jegley. Joe Jegley was our jumping coach, so we had a jumping team in this little. I lived in Pittsburgh. We were 5 miles from Powder Mill Park, and at Powder Mill Park there was the CC built a 35 meter jump and a 20-meter jump. So we used to. That's where I really did most of my skiing. I was a ski jumper.
Did you ever see your letters of recommendation?
What?
Did you ever see your letters of recommendation?
No.
Do you have any idea what was in them?
Oh, I imagine, I really don't know. They probably say, well, he loves the outdoors, he's a skier, something to that effect.
What was in your fabricated letters of recommendation?
Oh, that, of course, we told, you know, here's a fellow who's really skied in the Alps, and which he did. I mean, no, it was based on fact, but the signatures were false.
Did your friend Chuck have any consternation about fighting against the homeland, and his father was fighting against
No.
allies?
As a Jew, he did not. I mean...
Now, his father was a Jew, sort of conscripted.
Oh, I mean, his father was a Jew, and his mother was a Jew. and they were very wealthy, but very much discriminated against, naturally. I mean, they dismissed the Holocaust. And
Well, that's amazing that his father was
Yeah.
sort of conscripted.
oh, not his father.
Oh, it wasn't? Oh.
No. He was. I mean, he was my age. I'm sorry to made a mistake there, but it was Werner Wolfgang. I mean, Chuck. He's my age. Yeah.
What unit did you serve in? When you went to Hale, what unit were you assigned to?
Well, first of all, I went to headquarters of the 3rd Battalion of the 85th, and then I was assigned to L Company.
So you stayed in the 85th your whole career?
Yeah.
Okay. Once you got to Hale, what was it like?
Well, to me, it was the difference between Fort McClellan and Camp Hale, where I wanted to be. And, you know, meeting these very interesting people and the skis, and, wow, I was in heaven. I just loved it.
Did you feel like you were slightly better prepared because you'd already done basic training and had infantry training in the fall?
Not then. It was in combat, but not then. Because all I wanted to do was get out and ski and climb, and it was just a great group of people to be with.
How did you get to know about
We
the
should
10th?
cut here, honey. I gotta cut the Bar Harbor bell there.
Oh, good.
Okay, moving on.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about how you came to hear about the 10th Mountain Division.
Well, one thing, of course, being a skier or a ski jumper, I heard about it, read about it, and then one of the great publicists in the Pittsford Post, a guy who would write letters to his mother, was Dick Wilson, and he described this as Sun Valley, which wasn't quite true, but he wrote great letters, and so Dick played a part, but he was ahead of me in high school. We grew up together.
So Dick was a good writer even then.
Oh yeah, no, he was a very good writer.
So somehow Dick's letters got in the newspaper, I take it, or?
Oh, his mother put him in there, Mrs. Wilson, and and they were very interesting. Of course, then I found, you know, some of the stuff wasn't quite up to snuff.
What sort of stuff?
Well, it sounded more glamorous than it really was. Okay.
In what way?
Oh, you know, about the skiing, and I had the feeling that, well, hell, this is like going to Sun Valley after reading Wilson's letters. And, but I said, oh, this is a great place. This is where I want to be. And so that was, so Dick's letters had some influence. But I also took some of them with a grain of salt.
Did you ever happen to mention this to Dick Wilson?
Oh, yes. I've kidded Dick about these incredible letters that he would write to his mother that would be published in the local weekly paper, the Pittsford Gazette. Or no, Pittsford Post. It was the Gazette one time.
Well,
Let's Nick, put your hair down a little bit. You got a little wrist. There you go. Perfect.
Okay, gosh.
now Dick Wilson is a creative writer, but is it possible that he truly did feel that this was paradise?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of guys said, oh, this is great. You know, compared to where you could be.
Well, especially you had perspective on where you could be.
Yes, I did.
So you were actually quite fortunate to have seen both sides of it. When you were in training, can you think about a memorable training experience
You mean at Camp Hale?
at Camp Hale?
Oh, I do remember one and I think, I don't know of any other company or platoon, but we were on Sugarloaf in the Sugarloaf Mountain, and we were out there for bivouacking and skiing, and we were in a sort of a draw coming down like this, and that's where we had our camping fire in the below timberline, but it was this sort of like a cool, well, it was steep draw, and that's where the cooking mess tent was, and then we stayed, it camped around there, bivouacked around there. So we are, my platoon is on Sugarloaf, and it was fairly steep, and we're going across like this, you know, zigzagging like that, and I was in the third, I think the third squad, and then the first squad, they go across, and the avalanche occurs, and you know, it just zoom came down, and the first squad, I think they got up to here in the snow. Further down, it would be higher and higher, but nobody got buried. But then the avalanche kept on going down this draw and took out the mess tent and took out a lot of other stuff. Incredible trees. I mean, lucky that nobody was hurt. But I've never heard anybody else say that they were caught in an avalanche. But that was a very memorable experience.
Do you think you might have triggered that avalanche?
Oh, there's no question. No, it was the first squad that triggered it, because they went across and knifed it right near the top. There was a cornice, but they knifed it, and then it just slid, you know, just like that. Now they would, the training, the thing to avoid it, I mean, how to get out of an avalanche, was to lean down, unhook your bindings, and, you know, get out of it and then start swimming. But you can't do that. It happens so fast. Your skis just carry you right on down. And great idea in theory, but it doesn't work.
Did you feel like that sort of training, you know, prepared you for what was to come?
Oh, you mean the avalanche? Not really. I just think it was a unique kind of experience, because we didn't have that much skiing in Italy, as you know.
How about, that also probably qualifies as one of your more dangerous experiences in training. Can you think of other sort of semi-dangerous? How about D-series?
No, I can't think of. I'm just trying to think of. I can think of sort of a fun kind of thing. At one point, I volunteered to be. Well, I was the scout for my squad, and then I volunteered to be the scout for the company. And there was another fellow by the name of, Wales Kennedy. And being scout was fun and training, because you get out and you got on more patrols. You get out, you didn't have the backpack, and so you get out and be able to ski, come back, report. That was fun. But it wasn't fun to be first scout in combat. Yeah. But it was fun in training.
How much did your pack weigh in training?
You know, I never really weighed it, but I know it was damn heavy. It was later on that we knew that it was 90 pounds up to when you had your ammunition and your rifle. That added a lot of weight, and I think up to about 100, 110 pounds that you were humping around.
How much did you weigh?
At that time, I weighed 135.
And so what happened if you fell down?
Let's do a.
Oh.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, God, I got it. All right.
What would happen if you fell down or sat down?
You had to take your pack off and get up, and you really needed a buddy, and we were taught to ski with a buddy, because if you if you skied into a tree hole, your skis go underneath the branches, and usually your rifle would come around on your backpack and whack you in the head, and of course you see stars, but you were really trapped, so you needed someone to help you get out of the tree hole, and that would take a fair amount of time. You're exhausted, and the other guys are exhausted, and then you hope you weren't going to fall in another tree hole.
So I guess you learned to watch out for tree holes.
Yes.
If you can.
If you can. And as most of the skiing was pretty basic. Snow plowing with that kind of weight. And, snow plow turns and stem turns. Of course, if you were skiing without the pack, and then you could do have some fun. But military skiing skiing anyway. It's a hell of a lot better than walking.
At Hale, you did a lot of maneuvers which required uphill skiing.
Yes.
What was that like?
It seemed that we did more uphill skiing than we did downhill skiing. And, I had to learn how to use the skins, because I was used to doing the herringbone, and I was primarily a cross-country and downhill skier, but I never really perfected any turns, because I was spending my time trying to jump. And so getting the hang of the skins was a little difficult, because you always had that idea of you had to edge a bit. When you edge, then you'd go backwards. And so then you realize you got to keep your skis flat on the snow so the skins can grip. And you're realizing it's amazing.
Did you ever have a sense that you're going uphill but your pack's pulling you downhill?
Well, I always thought it was pulling me downhill. But it was heavy and it was tough. And at one time in our battalion, we got the order once to climb without skins. And we were exhausted when we got to the top of this pass. And then the order came down to put your skins on. And the idea was they wanted to keep us together, and which I thought was sort of a stupid kind of thing to do. But that's the Army.
Did you ever think that some of the military structure sort of ran counter to what good outdoorsmanship should be?
Yes. It depends on if you had good officers who were mountain trained, who knew the mountains, made a heck of a lot different than, quote, the flatland officer who didn't understand. And so I know some companies had some great officers. We, in training, I thought, did not have, particularly the platoon leaders were not that good. But when we went overseas, we had some very good officers, good leadership.
Did you feel at Hale at all that you were sometimes training the officers in outdoor skills?
Not I personally, but we knew that some of the officers, some of the sergeants, particularly those who came from Hawaii who were regular Army, damn good, you know, training soldiers, but they had a tough time in skiing, but they really did learn it. And I think maybe the most difficult thing for these guys was rock climbing. They, you know, were, quote, fearless training soldiers, but you get them on the rocks, and it just wasn't natural. It wasn't their thing. And so they demonstrated that they did have human qualities of fear, which is good to see.
It's reality-based.
Reality-based. And I think that you can make good soldiers out of mountaineers and skiers, but I think it's very difficult to make skiers and mountaineers out of soldiers.
Well, what qualities would you think most of the soldiers had in the 10th?
Well, I think they had the, you know, the love of the outdoors. I mean, there are all sorts of skills in skiing. One of the fellows in my company who became a college roommate of mine was an incredible downhill skier, slalom, Charlie Carpenter. And when we were back at Dartmouth, he was probably one of the best slalom skiers in the country. He would beat Colin Stewart, Brookie Dodge. These were considered real hot. But Charlie fell in love, and he said, "The hell with racing." So.
Now, what do you recall about D-Series? You'd been, let's see, you'd been enlisted a few months when you were you there for D-Series?
Well, we got there just about the time of D-Series. And so I got in some D-Series, so I didn't have some of the real experiences that the other guys had.
Were there any other maneuvers that were extended besides D-Series for you?
There were two, you know, maneuvers involving skiing, and those I enjoyed very much. And then, of course, we had rock climbing experiences, taking pill boxes, and this is over around Gold Park, and they had these pill boxes, and I think Chuck Hoffman was involved in that as one of the leaders. But the thing that to me was sort of frightening was I wasn't to use the flame throwers. You know, you would be approaching the pillbox, and then these guys would put the flame in. You know, just the smell of that thing, and seeing what it was doing to the pillbox, and thinking if you were on the other side. Thank God in combat we never had that. But the flamethrowers were frightening even on your own side. And
I take it that you had a chance to launch a few flamethrowers?
Huh?
I take it you had a chance to launch a few flamethrowers?
No, I never did. I was next, they were part of our combat squad, so they were separate. But so we learned what they were doing, and something I wouldn't want to do, to have that backpack on with all that gas, or whatever it is, the fuel anyway, that burning fuel.
Did you prefer to be out on maneuvers, or did you prefer to be back at Camp Hale?
Well, I like the maneuvers. And I think a lot of us did. But when I was back at Camp Hale, of course, it was great to go to the movie or things like that. Right.
Explain to me what a problem would be when you were on a maneuver. And what is a problem for people who don't know what they are, and how are they solved?
I think one of the basic problems is, keeping yourself warm at night, I found that a lot of us didn't like the mountain tents because they were cold inside. When I meant they're cold, you'd wake up and you had all that moisture. And I always felt a little claustrophobic in the tent. And I also felt a little claustrophobic in my sleeping bag, particularly when I got the mummy bag turned around and then trying to get out. So a lot of us would sleep in a hole. You just dig a hole in the snow and then put the pine boughs down and put your sleeping bag in there. And psychologically, I felt much better sleeping out in a snow hole, or one that you created. No.
Okay.
Which one are we going to?
Well, the leading question.
Do one of these here, Newcomb.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I won't let you get out of it.
I mean, I don't want to look like Bozo.
No, you look great.
Bozo on a bed here. There.
Yeah.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
When you think about what the problems were out on maneuver,
Oh, it was, sleeping at night and keeping warm. And we had the mountain tent, and the mountain tent gave me a feeling of claustrophobia. And then when you would wake in the morning, because of the condensation from your breathing, we would wake up to a lot of ice that would trickle on down. And so the combination, but mostly that claustrophobic feeling of being in the tent and then sometimes getting twisted up in my sleeping bag. And so many of us would sleep out of doors and dig a snow hole to put our sleeping bags in, but usually would put in pine boughs and then our sleeping bag. And it was much more comfortable. Even though you'd wake up with maybe a foot of snow on you, it still was much more comfortable.
well, how about a problem in a military sense? Because isn't a military problem the same as what we call war games today?
Yeah.
What sort of military problems would you encounter, and how would you solve them?
I must say there was, I'm just sort of thinking about, one time we had some war games. I think this might have been on the regimental level. And I think one battalion against another battalion. And one of the things was that we were going to go through the enemy line, and during a snowstorm, just happened that a snowstorm was developing, and our mission was to capture the troops on the front, in front of us, and we were going around behind them. Well, we had one soldier in my platoon by the name of CLIR. CLIR was a Finn, and CLIR had fought in the Russo-Finnish War. And how he got into the ski troops was that a Finnish ship, after the Finnish Civil War, after the Finnish-Russian War, was blowing up, and he ended up in New York. And as you know, the United States drafts aliens. And so Kealy, being Finn and a skier, he ended up at Camp Hale. And he was one hell of a soldier. He won the Mannerheim Medal, which is like the Congressional Medal of Honor, because he would lead these patrols along the Russian advancing lines, and they would snipe the Russian commanders, and they would blow up the mess trains or the mess cars that were coming in. It was, it was mostly motorized, and they were stuck. And so Kealy, at this one time, said, we'll get behind their line. And so he took some oil and some wax, and so we oiled all our bindings so they wouldn't squeak, and put stuff on our boots. And I'll tell you, we slipped right through the line. They couldn't hear us. And obviously they couldn't see us because it was a terrific snowstorm. And we had a successful mission in capturing them. But we probably would have floundered if it hadn't been for Kealy. And I learned more from Kealy Ranconen, which saved my life in Italy. Because he told me we would practice, you know, in approaching machine gun positions in training, and found out you could get in just a little defilade like this and very close to machine gun fire, and they couldn't deflect their gun that low. And so there are a lot of things that we in our platoon learned from Kealy. Now he spoke very little English, and I think one of the most humorous things is that we used to have these sort of Mickey Mouse lectures by the company commander or the platoon leader, you know, when we were at Hale, and they would be teaching you about, I don't know what it is, but Kealy Ranconen had the ability to come up at the appropriate time with his favorite expression, mule shit. And it was perfect. And the timing was right, and the officers were very careful in offending Kealy, because thing about Finns, they love knives and they keep their knives sharp. He had a very sharp bayonet, and in a way they sort of respected Kealy, but he served for us great humor. His timing was perfect, it was impeccable, and sometimes the lectures would get over quickly, more quickly.
You lucked out.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you might have lucked out also having somebody who was a Finn, who obviously was sort of a role model for the whole 10th Mountain being? Do you think that the Finns were a role model?
Oh, yes. Well, it was the Russo-Finnish War. I'm sure that you've heard before.
Right.
Was the background, the raison d'etre for the 10th Mountain, because there were, I guess it was Minnie Dole, and oh gosh, I think there's a 10th guy, I can't think of his name, went to Harvard. Well, anyway, they were all over at Pico, and it was storming outside, and they were talking about after the Russo-Finnish War, and then I don't know whether it was before or after Norway fell, that they said, you know, I think there's going to be a great threat of invasion to the United States, and they'd come through Canada. And so the ideas, I think, formed then. And of course, you've always heard, you know, everybody knows the story about Minnie Dole and his really pushing the Army for mountain troops, ski troops.
Well, did you feel lucky that you had a Finn among your midst who had been
Oh.
experienced in that Finnish-Russian?
Oh, yeah, very much. Unfortunately, Kealy did not go overseas with us because in Leadville, I don't know if you know, Finns have an affinity for vodka or any alcohol, and sort of like the Indians in a way, because we have a Finnish community in Newport, my hometown, and there are, unfortunately, a lot of Finns who are alcoholics. Well, Kealy Ranconen was a heavy drinker, and he was in Leadville, and one thing you never dared do was put your hand on Kealy. I mean, he would react very quickly, and so Kealy was drunk. 2 MPs come up, put their hands on him, he quickly pulled out his bayonet and knifed both of those MPs, and he ended up in Leavenworth. A sad ending for CLIR Conan. And
The MPs were on our side.
huh?
The MPs were on our side.
Well, sometimes you,
Well,
you know, the MPs were not always on our side.
but in the very big thing,
Yeah, yes, yeah, I
they
know.
were on our
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
Wow. So he took, okay.
Do you want to follow up? Because you have about a minute left.
Oh,
Okay.
so he sat out the whole war.
In prison, I think he was there. I really don't know the details, but he probably was there for.
Did you know at the time that the Finns were such leaders in this kind of warfare?
Oh yes, I mean we all knew that the Finns were, you know, incredible skiers, and the fact that they were able to defend their country with very little ammunition and just holding up the Russian forces was incredible. You know, sometimes they would skate, and they'd have their skis with them, and they were just great heroes to many of us who grew up in the late 30s, and the Finns were really the ski troops, and so we had a lot of respect for the Finns. And
Good.
Perfect.